Before you were born, something has been written about you. So when you come now, you say, I want to choose my father. You are not to choose your father. You are not to choose your calling. You are to discover your calling, discover your purpose. Because before you were born, your calling existed. Am I communicating here? You are born to fulfill a plan. You are born to fulfill a purpose. That's what we call, like in marriage, that's what we call the permissive will of God, and that's the perfect will of God. Now, the permissive will of God is the general will of God for man. Now, God says, if you find a wife, you find a good thing. That means every believer, you don't need prophecy to choose a wife. When you like somebody, pray about it, you are compatible, God endorsed it, you are free to marry. Now, that is the general will of God. But there are specific people that God himself specifically gives some direction on who to marry. It's not for everybody. Now, it is a general promise of God, the will of God for everyone. Maybe with time I will talk about different dimensions of the will of God, because we have different types of God's will. I'm going to talk about that some other time. But now there's a general promise, will of God. He said, whatsoever your hand findeth to do, I will prosper it. That means as a believer, whatever you do, if you decide to sell yam, you prosper it. Whatever your hand findeth to do, I will prosper it. But there are people that God gives specific instruction. Now, they get more blessed because their own, they were given specific what? Instruction. Now, maybe they intend to go and sell yam, and God said, don't sell yam, just go and sing for me. Now, if you follow a man or a woman that have received specific instruction while you are still functioning in permissive will, you kill yourself. Now, there are people today, they just wake up and say, God have called me into ministry. I want to enter into full-time ministry. When you are not assigned for that, you get stranded. Am I talking to people in the house here? You get stranded because the fact that you see somebody doing doesn't mean you are called to do it. So there are people, they can marry anybody, they are fine. But there are people, because of the specific or special assignment. Now in the Bible, there's a man of God called Uzziah. And God said to him specifically, said, go and marry a prostitute. That was a direct instruction. Oh Lord, don't give me that kind of instruction, Lord. He said, go and marry, because God used the life of the prophet to preach to the people of Israel. God was using his life to minister to people. So God gave him specific instruction. Go and marry. Now, it does not mean that every man of God, every prophet must marry a prostitute. That is why I never encourage anybody to go and buy books about dreams. Stop wasting your time going to buy a book. They call it interpretation of dreams. How do you know? Because what God is showing to this man is not what God is showing to me. We might see the same thing in a dream, but God is giving a different message. So that is why, because some of you say, oh, I dreamt in my dream, I saw a goat. That means God wants to bless me. That might be a blessing to this brother at that time. So when God is showing me a goat, I have to understand what God is saying. I don't act based on the interpretation of his dream. Because to every man, a vision is given. To every man, interpretation is given. I feel like I'm pushing to myself this morning. So when you go to buy a book, interpretation of dream. What I dreamt, what did you see? They were chasing me. Oh, it's witchcraft. It's witchcraft. No, it's an error. You have to understand what God is saying to you. Because you are not that man there. You are not that man. So if God is showing this man this, that is the will of God for him. You might have the same vision, you must understand God's will for your life. You must discover how you are born, what God has called you to do. You must understand the process that you are meant to go through in life. If you don't understand this, you keep running in circles. Running in circles. The destiny of the whole world was tied to Jesus. If you fail, the world collapsed. If you fail, the world failed. And he said, Lord, it's not my will, because in my will there is weakness. In my will there is selfishness. In my will there is hatred. In my will there is laziness. In my will there is envy, malice, jealousy. He said, but it's not my will, because if I function in my will, I will not be able to please God. Your greatness is not tied to your will. Your greatness is tied to the will of God. There are many people that are being limited today because they start functioning in their will. The moment you begin to function in your way, it begins to reduce your capacity. It begins to bring you down because why? You are acting out of script. And the producer will tell you, cuts.